It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Economics Department and Sustainability Work Group's webinar on investment planning and service delivery through asset management, equity, and affordability considerations at the Portland Water Bureau. The topic sheds light on the United Nations Development Programme Sustainable Development Goals SDG 6, Clean Water and Sanitation, and SDG 10, Reduced Inequalities. We're delighted to welcome our two speakers, Mr. Mert Müftügil and Mr. Eric Pacheco from Portland Water Bureau, to our webinar. Thank you both for joining us.
Good evening to you all, and good morning to Eric and I in Portland. We are very happy to be here, and thank you for your invitation. We are going to have our introductions in the coming few slides as well, just a little bit. But before we start, I'd like to note for the record that our talk is titled Investment Planning and Service Delivery through Asset Management, Equity and Affordability Considerations at the Portland Water Bureau. Now, Portland is located in Pacific Northwest of United States. And we are known for a few of our things. We have a very big microbrewery culture in Portland. We'd like to start with that because obviously water is very important when it comes to microbreweries. I don't even know how many microbreweries we have, but it's a ton. We are also known for our unique organic coffees, and I actually happen to have the same one in the picture at home. That's what I'm drinking today. We have so many different cuisines, especially with sort of the street food boom that started over the last, I would say, 5 years or so. So we have a lot of different foods you could taste at a low cost, spread around the city, as well as like we noted, we are the best city in the USA for vegans, one of the best cities in the USA for vegans and vegetarians. All right, so after that little bit of a brief introduction about our city, which we really like. So today's presentation is divided into 5 major sections. We have a brief introduction about ourselves that we may not have covered so far. We are going to talk about the water utility business basics, the Utility 101, and some background information about the Portland Water Bureau. Then I'm going to spend a little bit of time telling you more about what we do at the asset management branch. It will be a subset of what we do, but I'll try to hit on the highlights. And then we'll move on to our equity and affordability considerations, which Eric will cover. For me, asset management has been my main focus since around the summer of 2007. I had the chance to work with a number of water and wastewater utilities around primarily in North America, but I've had some exposure to global clients as well, and kind of gave me a little bit of a breadth and understanding of these long-term infrastructure management principles. And the one thing that I think was helpful for me was the engineering management education I got, as well as the engineering background that preceded it. Before I move on to next slide, real quick, Eric, anything you would like to highlight on your end?
Yeah, thank you, Mert, and good evening, everyone. My background is on economic development. Worked most of my career on first the Millennium Development Goals back when they existed, and have really been working on the nexus of human well-being, environmental sustainability, and economic development throughout my career. And so right now at the Portland Water Bureau, I get to do a little bit of everything centering equity, and I'll get into that as part of my presentation.
Let's go into the meat of the presentation. So I generally like to start these talks by sort of like with some basic fundamentals on the overall operation of a utility business. Not many people perhaps stop to think about it or they realize it, but This is a pretty, capital intensive business. There are a few charts here that sort of illustrate this point, and I want to highlight. So on the left, we see the ratio of net capital stock to gross value added, the value of a company or a business. So you'll notice that the water supply and sewage management business is pretty much as capital intensive as a business gets. We often hear about how starting a airline is difficult because it is such a capital intensive business. But when you think about it, sort of transportation is actually even less capital intensive than water sector. So the point here I want to make is that it takes a lot of capital investment to make a dollar in this business. So it has its own unique challenges, and planning becomes even more important in an environment such as this. Among the utilities themselves, if you look at the chart on the right, and these are a little older figures, they're a little over 10 years old, but the fundamentals have not really changed. You'll notice that out of different utility businesses, may it be water or energy production or telecommunication, among those, water itself is also more capital intensive. That kind of makes it a little difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis. This sort of capital intensity, and combined with a few other factors, such as the health and safety risks involved in providing, water service, basically a product people drink and use for hygiene and so forth. Plus, with the technology and the equipment we use, the need for, having a skilled labor pool to operate and maintain with a lot of certifications and training requirements generally tends to lead itself into a bit of a monopolistic structure, if you will. That's why, you are most of the time you're not going to see a lot of, competing, companies, trying to sort of, compete with each other and, deliver water to, to the same houses in the same district. So these are some of the basic fundamentals I like to start, just to again highlight, how sort of long-term planning and sustainable infrastructure management actually is even more important for this business than other businesses out there. Next, we'd like to talk a little bit about our guiding statement. So we're going to bring it a little bit around Portland Water Bureau from this point forward. So our mission as an organization is that we serve excellent water every minute of every day. So it's a 24/7 operation, and we want to get that water from the source to our customers' taps. Our vision is that the water our community loves is safe and abundant for generations to come. Again, highlighting that sustainability perspective. And with Eric's addition to the Portland Water Bureau team over the last few years, we have an equity, much increase in our equity focus as well. And our equity statement, and I will read, is that we work to uproot systemic inequities and their impacts on our employees and the people we serve. We commit to the difficult and essential work of transforming Water Bureau policies, practices, and culture to better serve historically and currently oppressed communities. Focusing on our priorities real quick, before we move on to the sort of describing our technical infrastructure. Our priorities are basically providing clean, safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water. Some of the highlights, of course, is that perhaps unique to us, is that we also happen to be in an environment where we are prone to a future large, almost catastrophic earthquake that will happen in this region. So we have increased seismic resilience focus, and we have a focus on improving our infrastructure, making it earthquake resilient. And we, in addition to, of course, providing water service to the houses, we also provide water service to commercial clients, industrial clients for manufacturing, as well as making the water available for firefighting operations. Now, how do we do all this? We do it by utilizing an infrastructure worth over 14 billion United States dollars. Of course, this infrastructure didn't just root out of the ground overnight. It took many years centuries almost, to sort of build and expand and add to it on top of each other. But this is the infrastructure we manage, about $14 billion worth. Some examples of what we own as Portland Water Bureau. Our water primarily comes from the Bull Run watershed, which is located about 40 miles east of the city. I've been there. I have some photos there. It's a beautiful, pristine land where human recreation is not allowed. It's actually a protected water source. We also have a groundwater supply that we use to augment when we have low water levels in the watershed, or we need to save the water for to satisfy the requirements of our habitat management plan. We have our pump stations. We have storage tanks. We have about 3,600 kilometers of pipe between our water source and, of course, our distribution system where we take the water to people's houses. And we have about 180,000 meters, which means that that's the number of customers we have as an organization. That doesn't equal to a number of people, but just the number of connections we have to buildings. This is our operational map. So you see the downtown Portland area in light yellow color. We have the beautiful Columbia River in the north. That is our border with the state of Washington. And we have the Willamette River that runs through the middle of the city, which we have like 9 beautiful bridges on. And that joins the Columbia River at the north. And then Columbia River goes to the Pacific Ocean, not that far of a drive from here. In addition to providing water service to the downtown Portland area, we also serve the surrounding communities, which we call our wholesale customers. So we provide them water, and they are then in turn responsible for distributing it to their citizens, their customers. Some written highlights. On average, we produce about close to 400 cubic meters of water a day. This is on average. So in the summertime, it may go up 20% more. In the wintertime, it's 20% less, primarily because of basically our customers irrigating their backyards or their front yards of their houses. Our 5-year capital improvement program budget last year was close to $400 million. And our operations budget, OPEX, is around $212 million. Now, when you think about how much asset we own, that's actually, I think that's a little less than 2% of our assets we spend on annual operations cost to sort of maintain and operate and keep going. We serve about 1 million people, in this whole service area, including our wholesale customers. About 600,000 of them are actually residential customers, so people's homes or large apartment buildings. And then in downtown Portland, and then the rest, 344,000, goes through our wholesale customers. So our ratio is about 40% of our water is distributed around the city, about 60% we use ourselves. There are some industry challenges I like to highlight in the water industry business. These are primarily items that we've noticed in the United States. Not all of them apply here in Portland Water, of course, and I'll highlight them, starting with increasing demand. Generally, in the United States, the population center of the country, meaning when you average out where everybody lives, the population center has been moving from the Boston area in the 1770s down to Los Angeles area. Today, it is somewhere in the middle of the country in Kansas, I think. My point being, United States is on a migration, if you will, from northeast to southwest. There's nothing wrong, obviously, moving into other places. The challenge is the southwest generally doesn't have a lot of water. It's a drier part of the country, so that kind of taxes the system and increases the demand in that area where we have less water anyway. But for Portland's case specifically, actually, we've been pretty successful in water efficiency measures, and people are aware of their impact on the water use. So we haven't personally seen, not personally, but as an organization, we haven't seen a lot of increasing demand on our end. But we have seen, and other utilities as well, have seen reduction in available water resources, where basically makes the sustainability aspects of this more important. There has been a lot of innovation in the water sector over the last few years, a few decades. But we are sort of coming to a leveling of that until the infrastructure, if you will, the soft infrastructure is in place to be able to sort of propel us to the next level, where we use big data and machine learning and digital twins, some of these concepts more effectively. So we are sort of leveling our innovation a little bit. At the same time, there are increasing treatment requirements coming up. For example, we now have to build a water filtration plant that needs to be online in 2027 that we didn't have to deal with for many generations so far. So we need to deal with that. And overall, there is this aging infrastructure. As a country, United States hasn't really invested as much in infrastructure since the post-World War II era. So all that investment needs to be replaced in the near future. So these are the financial challenges. On the other hand, we have other challenges. We have sort of like organizational management, planning, and structural sort of challenges. One of them is our aging customer base, not just us, but there is a common trend in the industry. Of course, the population doesn't necessarily change. Population does increase, but with an aging customer base, more of the fixed income of our customers come from their retirement sources. And every year, as the water rates increase, and especially if they increase above the rate of inflation, they take a larger chunk of the fixed income our customers have to continue that service. So that is something that is we need to keep in mind, especially in our affordability calculations. Generally, there is reduced technical labor pool available. This comes from a generational shift of maybe not necessarily investing as much in STEM, that's the science and technology fields, and not as many students actually following that path. There has been some change recently on this, some improvement, if you will, but we are generally dealing with a reduced available technical labor pool. But also, because of the population demographics, there is this risk of losing institutional knowledge, basically the information in people's heads as they retire and take it with them. I've worked with some clients where more than 50% of their employees were eligible to retire at that time. So if they all go like, oh, you know what, economy isn't doing great, I think I'm just going to take retirement now and live comfortably with it, they would just be able to do that, go away, and of course all that experience walks out the door with them. And lastly, sometimes when it comes to rate increases, basically the cost of water, there is the political element involved in some of these decision makings, and of course our customers too. There is this resistance to rate increases, which we understand. Historically, if you look at inflation increases though in the country, but if you slice it a little bit and look at the inflation increases across different sectors, generally construction, infrastructure, water services related items actually have increased above average, basically at a higher inflation rate. So that kind of taxes us to actually basically increase our rates more than average to sort of keep up with that inflation. So that has that is also something that's in our minds as we sort of do these long-term plans. But I don't necessarily want to paint a very dire picture. There are ways utilities are finding, through better planning, more efficient use of their resources to challenge each and every one of these resources. And I like to use this as an opportunity to move into how an asset management framework can actually provide some long-term planning benefits to deal with these challenges. So now on the screen, you see our asset management framework. So this is the framework that we use at the Portland Water Bureau. According to a survey I saw, maybe it was about 7 years ago, this specific framework is the most widely used framework in the water utility business in the United States for asset management. This is referred to in the industry as the 5 core questions, 10-step process of asset management. And EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, promoted this for over the last 15 years. It centers around asking 5 core questions, and those are, and these I'm going to read, starting with understanding what is the current state of my assets. Once we know that, then we move on to what is my required levels of service, meaning what do we need our assets to do for us and for our customers, for our community. Then moving on to which assets are critical to sustained performance. So not all assets are created equal. They don't all have the same purpose. Some of them are more important than others, and they deserve more of our energy, investment, and attention. So it's good to know what is what on that criticality scale, if you will. Using these three questions then as input into a decision-making framework comes the next question, question number 4. What are my best operations and maintenance and CIP investment strategies? Basically, it's an optimization exercise, long-term planning exercise, and how we are going to use that input then to better manage our infrastructure. And lastly, then we'll move on to using all that built up information to finding the best long-term funding strategy. Generally, that's when our finance team gets involved, and then they have their rate models, they do their 10-year projections, so that they can sort of plan ahead with our financial performance. I'm not going to go over the individual 10 steps here for sake of time, but generally there is a ton of best management practices and processes and sub-processes that go into each of these 10 boxes to be able to achieve that specific objective. But I do want to highlight one item just to illustrate one of the things that we do on the asset management branch as an organization. Before that, I'd like to quickly note that I love the definitions of the International Standards Organization. The standard number that covers asset management activities is the 55,000 series. This is not specific to the water sector. It is actually asset management principles across all sectors, but it is applicable, of course, to the water sector as well. So they define asset management as the coordinated activities to extract value from assets. So that is what we do essentially. And one example of that is that we try to develop the analytics and the data and the calculations that go with basically calculating the cost of service, providing the cost of service long term. So what is that investment we need to operate and maintain our infrastructure sustainably? And then, linking that to levels of service, meaning what our assets will do with that investment, what they can do, what they cannot do with that investment. And while we are balancing all that, what is our risk profile, our risk exposure as an organization? If we are not investing a lot in our assets, obviously our cost of service will be low, but we will not be able to deliver a high level of service. And if we are not investing a lot in our assets either, our risk exposure will be high because things could fall apart and we may not be able to provide clean and safe drinking water to our customers. So it is also important to invest the right amount so that we can manage those risks. To take the level of service discussion, just as one example to take it a little bit forward, as to one of the things that we do here in the asset management branch, is that we try to provide a line of sight between the strategic objectives and the organizational service levels. Basically, strategic objectives start at the top. The organization sets this together at the executive level, and perhaps providing a reliable water supply is a good example. There are many other strategic objectives, and under there sit our customer service levels. Basically, how customers experience these strategic objectives. What does it mean for them? And under that, we have our assets that actually deliver upon those service requirements from our clients, our customers, those service expectations. And then under it, we have our organizational service levels. We also call these workload measures, meaning that's the work that we need to do or the organization needs to do to support the assets, to support the customers, to support the strategic objectives. Just to illustrate my point with an example, I mentioned providing a reliable water supply as a strategic objective, one of our strategic objectives. But what does it mean for customers? So that means we've defined it as, through our surveys with our customers, we've held focus groups back in 2016 on these issues. For them, it means no more than 5% of our customers are out of water over 8 hours in a given year. We know if we've met this requirement or not because we track our water outages and how long they take, and then we can report on this every year. But that's one thing. That's, we've established that metric by, obviously coordinating and speaking to our customers. However, what does it mean from an asset service delivery perspective? So we've gone back and we've done some analytics. We've developed a water pipe replacement strategy back in 2018 and used that as input. Basically, our goal is to have less than 8 water pipe breaks per 100 miles of pipe in a given year. So we have about 2,200 miles of pipe. So that translates to about, I think, 200 breaks per year in our water system in this, the 600 square kilometer area we serve. So that's what our assets need to do. So if our water pipes break below that threshold, we believe we are able to go repair things on time and restore service before this before this metric around providing water outage less than 8 hours per year is met. So that's the relationship there. And of course, what it means for us, we need to do a certain level of renewal of our infrastructure so that we can sustain its performance. And that means that we replace 12 miles of our water pipes every year so that we could maintain this level of break activity or less. So this is one very small example of what we do at the asset management branch. But one of our main goals then is to develop an optimized long-term financial liability picture. This is an example, something that looks like this. We develop maybe 3 or 4 of these a year for our 4 different asset groups we serve. What we have here is the expenditure or the cost on the y-axis over time on the x-axis. And then it kind of helps us sort of paint a picture of our capital, basically infrastructure renewal responsibilities, as well as our operations and maintenance responsibilities, all in one snapshot. Generally, it's shown as is in today's dollars. But of course, when the finance team takes over this financial liability picture, they account for the discount rates and the inflation rates for their long-term planning. But a couple of things that generally emerges from a picture like this is that we'll have highs and we'll have lows when you look at a 50-year or 100-year outlook. This is helpful because you can tell roughly when the highs are and when the lows are, so that you could devise a more balanced infrastructure reinvestment portfolio. Maybe just as an example, we have a lot of capital liability in the beginning, in the first few years. And then we have a little bit of a breathing period, soon followed by, again, a need for reinvestment around, in this case, around the 2030s. So once we know sort of what is coming up in the near future, in the midterm future, and in the far future, we could sort of, distribute those investments over multiple years, multiple generations, even if you will, depending on what kind of investments they are, so that we have a more balanced investment requirement. Anyway, so this, of course, is part of the equation. This gets us only, so far identifying the need, what we need to do, how much we need to invest. Then I'm going to actually stop my presentation here. I'm going to pass it along to Eric, and he's going to cover the equity, what we do regarding equity in the Portland Water Bureau, and how we can perhaps look into prioritizing our investment to close some of the equity gaps we have in our society.
Thank you so much, Mert. What you noticed about Mert's presentation is that it really focused on the infrastructure part of the business, but it didn't focus so much on the people, right? And we are a government agency, and water ultimately is for the well-being of people, right? In fact, water sanitation is perhaps one of the best things we can do for economic development, right? In general, and when you look at the investments that we've made over 100 years, $14 billion, that fosters economic developments in terms of jobs. Clean water in itself prevents illness, which is an economic benefit for the society. So our focus is to have good infrastructure, but we also need to match that with, are we providing people with the resources they need so they can thrive? And that's what really equity is ultimately all about. Equity is about creating the opportunities for all people to have access to the resources and opportunities they need to thrive, so their identities do not predict their outcomes. And I'll talk about identities here, but before I move, I want to focus here that the premise is that we all have different needs, right? No two individuals have the same needs, right? I have different needs than my children, and I have different needs than my parents because they're aging. And so the idea here is that our identities may require us to have different needs, right? We can think about our race or socioeconomic status, income, wealth, our gender, are you a man or are you a woman, or gender non-conforming, your level of disability and health, right? If you have a disability, you're gonna have different needs than somebody that doesn't have a disability. Your sexual orientation, your religion, your language, your citizenship or nationality, level of education, and age. And so what you may recognize here is most of us have more than one identity. For example, I consider myself a Venezuelan. I grew up in Venezuela. I speak 3 languages, but my native language is Spanish. My level of education is I have a master's degree. I am a man. I have a middle income socioeconomic status. So all of these different levels of identities put me in a category and say my needs are going to be different than, say, somebody who's lower income, who lives with a disability, who only has a high school level of education, or maybe an older person, right? Here in the United States, race is the biggest predictor of outcome. So you may know a little bit about a history in the United States, but for a good part of 200 years, we had slavery in this country, in which white people enslaved the Black population. And as a result, even though that slavery hasn't been legal in this country for 150 years, the remnants of that history exist today, to the point that Black Americans experience worse outcomes than white Americans. And so, but we don't only focus on race. We focus on our approach really focuses on race, on disability, on gender, and socioeconomic status. Many of you might be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them in total, and these replaced the Millennium Development Goals, which started at the beginning of the century. And so these are the ones that we focus on. So obviously, no poverty. We want, as a government and as a water utility in particular, to foster the economic development of our city. And poverty is a big issue in the United States. Of all the OECD countries, we have the highest rates of poverty, and it's no different here in Portland. The majority of the population is doing well. But we have a poverty rate that is hovering around 10 to 12%. And so we try to use our economic investments in the city and infrastructure to provide jobs and to provide opportunity, but also, and I'll talk a little bit more about, provide affordable water, right? We want our low income population to have access to affordable water. The other part of this is education, of course. We need to maintain and train an educated workforce to be able to do this work, because we are the only water utility in the city of Portland, right? You wouldn't want 5 different pipes of water coming to your house. We need to train and develop our own workforce. So we're constantly recruiting recent graduates from high school or from college, from trade schools, to educate them. Gender equality is a big issue. At the Water Bureau, our workforce is only 35% women. And like any country, it's 50% women, the population, right? And so we have a little bit of ways to go to make sure that women are adequately represented and they can thrive within our workforce. Clean water and sanitation, I won't go there, but obviously we have environmental standards that we have to meet according to US regulatory laws. In the state as well. In terms of decent work and economic growth, as Mert mentioned in his presentation, we have a budget of about $550 million a year between our capital improvement and our operation budget. How we invest those resources and who gets that money makes a huge difference. So we can use our $550 million every year to stimulate economic growth. The next one goes into investments in infrastructure. Right now we're building an $850 million filtration plant that will live or exist for the next 50 years or so. Reduce inequalities. We want, and this is kind of across all spectrum of inequalities. It could be gender, income, race, disability, and so on. Sustainable cities and communities. Like many cities across the United States, we have a climate action plan that seeks to minimize our climate emissions and also minimize the impact that we have on the environment in response to our activities. And lastly, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And I can talk a little bit about this in my next slide on why do we use equity as a development framework. This is pretty universal across the world, is that most governments institutions were created by wealthy men, and there is nothing wrong with that. But when we think of user-centered design, right? When if you're going to design any piece of infrastructure or any service, or even if you're Apple and you're going to design a phone, right? The first thing you do is you go to your users and you ask them, well, what do you need? And you design based on the user's needs. Well, with governments, it didn't really happen that way. What happened is low-income groups, women, racial and ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, people with different sexual orientations, religious minorities were not part of the government designs, right? Governments were in large part designed by and for wealthy men in particular. And so their perspectives and their needs were not really considered as part of the design. You know, if you don't have the users, the diversity of users be part of the design in most governments, the systems and institutions that are created are not going to serve those people, not because they don't want to, but because they weren't designed to serve those people in that way. And so part of what we're doing now is say, well, we need to transform our government practices, our services, our institutions, our policies to center the needs of the community members who have been historically underserved and underrepresented in government. What would it look like to redesign our government institutions and services with the users that we have today, not the users that we had when the country was designed? We have a far more diverse population today than we did in 1776 when the country came into being. And so this is the other thing that we recognize, is that by helping the people that need the most help, you know, the people that are most vulnerable, that have the least amount of resilience, the poorest of the poor, it actually helps everybody else, right? When the ones that have the least among us are doing well, the rest of us are also doing well. And so how does implementing equity, an equity approach work? So first, we, as I mentioned this earlier, is every human being has different needs, right? A pregnant woman has different needs than a non-pregnant woman. A Black man who didn't have access to good education is going to have different needs than a wealthy woman who did have good access to education. But the people are the most important asset. And so infrastructure is great, but infrastructure is ultimately there to serve people. So if we don't invest in people, our infrastructure is useless. And as Mert mentioned, we have shortages of trained, qualified personnel in this country because we haven't been investing in people and education. We focus on identities, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's income or race or disability, because the identities of people is what most likely predicts our outcomes. So in the United States, race is the biggest predictor of outcomes. However, we recognize that these discriminations based on identity, they all have different causes, right? For example, in the United States, people with disabilities experience worse outcomes than people without disabilities, right? And the reason around that is predominantly because infrastructure wasn't designed with people with disabilities in mind. And so all of these discriminations against people have different causes, but we need to invest with people with the least access to resources and opportunity so that we can change the narrative, basically change where the focus of our investments from the people that already have resources and opportunities to those that could benefit the most is, in economics, I think some of your economic students, we get diminishing returns on investment, right? And so when we invest the most resources in the people that are at the bottom of the curve, we're going to get a greater return on our investment for every dollar that we invest. So what does this mean in practice, and how have we done it at the Portland Water Bureau? First, it starts with supporting the personal and professional development of government employees. So spending money on educating our workforce. We have about 600 employees at the Portland Water Bureau, and we've had to retrain and re-educate these workforce so that they think, how do I center equity into my work? How do I shift the policies and the practices and the services we provide so that we center the needs of the population that has been historically underserved and underrepresented? Next is, how do we center embed equity into our strategic plan and into our process improvement? So right now we have a 5-year strategic plan, and we also have a process improvement system. And so the idea is, how do we center equity into all of this decision making so that next generations won't have to deal with the same shifts in systems as we are doing today. The other thing was we established a dedicated team of equity within the government. In fact, at the Water Bureau, we are one of 27 government agencies within the municipal government. And of all the large departments, so transportation, environmental services, it deals with sewer, parks and housing, and all of these different government departments each have their own equity team. And so that allows them to focus on the systems that will transform their policies for their particular area of expertise. And the next one is, we developed a comprehensive equity plan which details outcomes, tools, priorities, and actions. And so this is going to be the focus of the rest of my presentation on what's in our equity plan and what does it mean in practice. There's something that historically when we measure things, so we set performance measures, we tend to focus on output. So an output is a measure of how much did we do, and you can move through this. There's three components here. So outputs is how much did we do, right? How many gallons or liters of water did we produce or did we deliver? But output is not necessarily a good measure. You can measure output and not really change who benefits, right? And so quality is, how well did we do that? How well did we deliver our services? For example, if people have a lot of water shutoffs or people are not able to pay their water, did we really provide a solution to people? What we really want to measure is, are people better off? And that's really the ultimate outcome, is, did we change the conditions of people? Is our population better before or better now than they were before our services? And so we want to always move towards having more and more people better off because of the services that we provide. And that's what our equity plan seeks to do. And so over the last 2 years, we focused on developing an equity plan, which actually we just launched at the beginning of last year. And so there are several components to this plan. First is, we develop a set of performance metrics that allows us to keep track on what I just mentioned. Are people better off? Second, we're using data tools to inform our decisions. So we're currently building an equity index using various indicators to help us embed that into our decision making. We're also creating an equity library for employees because we recognize our own employees need to have access to these resources and these tools so that they can better embed this into their decision making. We're building a performance dashboard to track our own progress over time. This is going to be the first year in which we issue an annual report card. We're also working to create equity champions within our workforce. So that means make our employees the champions of equity within the work. And lastly, because we are here to serve the community, do a lot of community engagement meetings so that we are constantly assessing are the community members getting what they need from us. So, and this is just a very quick overview of the structure of our equity plan. So we focus on two big categories: community service and workplace culture. Within community service, we have two subcategories, which is system reliability. So that deals with all the infrastructure. Is our infrastructure providing the services to people in a way that is sustainable and that people are getting what they need? The second piece is community relations, which is what partnerships do we have in place so that we can advance education and better serve all of our residents from a programmatic perspective. And then the other three are about our workforce. How are we recruiting and retaining our workforce? Are we improving our operational processes? And the last one is on accountability and leadership. Is our bureau leadership able to deliver on their plans and promises? So I won't go so much into detail here. I just wanted to point out that for each category, we've put a desired outcome of where do we want to get over the next 5 years. So I'm going to go dive a little bit deeper into each one of these. So this is a pretty large overview of all the things that we're focusing on. So within our system reliability, we're paying attention again and look at the farthest column to asset management, construction. What are the condition of our assets? We're also paying attention to emergency management. We have a lot of forest fires in this part of the country. We may have an earthquake. We are trying to figure out, if we have an earthquake tomorrow, it's going to be the most vulnerable populations that are going to be affected the most. So how do we prepare the most vulnerable populations so when there is an earthquake, they have more resilience? We're also looking at advanced metering infrastructure. So that's basically smart meters using technology. How are we responding to climate change? How are we educating the population about water conservation? And also, how are we building infrastructure that is more resilient and sustainable over the next decade or so? Next category is community relations. And so this is more about the programming. So we'll talk a little bit more about financial assistance programs, but obviously not everyone has the same availability to pay for our services. So we have financial assistance. In the Portland metropolitan area, we have speakers of about 12 different languages. So Spanish, Mandarin, Chinese Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian. We actually have a really large Russian and Ukrainian population in this part of the country. And so we have to provide our services and our materials in all of these different languages. Also, how are we dealing with customer service and the development of our workforce from the community? How are we providing our contracts and opportunities and so on? Section is on workforce development. So we're looking at how are we hiring our personnel and what flexibilities are we offering for them? How are we developing our leadership and creating learning opportunities and engagements for our employees? Next is on our organizational processes. So this is what Mert was talking a little bit more about. How are we embedding equity into our capital planning, into contracting, into key service level delivery? Our budget is hugely important for us. And lastly, accountability and leadership. So that's where we talk about performance management, training and development, conflict resolution, and participatory decision making. I wanted to give you a more concrete example on how we actually do this in practice. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously we have people in Portland of all socioeconomic backgrounds. That means that we have wealthier people and we have poorer people. And not everyone can afford the water rates that we have established. So right now, click next. Right now, our water rates are about $50 a month per family. So that may not seem like a lot, but if you are poor, that is a lot of money. And so that what you're seeing here at the top is it's for our residential, or sorry, that's for our wholesale customers, and at the bottom is for our residential customers. So what we are doing is we recognize that different people at different levels of socioeconomic or income levels are going to require different discounts of their water so they can afford their water. And so we have a tier 1 discount, and the tier 1 discount looks at 60% of the median family income. The median family income in Portland is about $82,000. 60% of that is our tier 1 discount. So those people are going to be paying about $22.45 a month. So it's about half of what a regular customer would pay. And the tier 2 discount is looking at 30% of the median family income, which is that $82,000. So it's about a little bit less than $30,000 a year, and those families would pay $8.99 a month. Rather than say everyone pays the same, which would be equality, right? We're saying, well, different people are going to need different things, and different income levels are going to require different rates. And so this is just an example of how equity has been embedded into our rate structure. We can provide, in addition to those discounts, we also provide crisis assistance, and you can keep moving forward. So we're able to provide people with a safety net utility program. So if people are unable to pay their bills for any reasons, we will not shut their water off. So this is an opportunity for if people lose their jobs or have an illness in the family, we will not shut their water off. We also have a leak repair assistance program. So a lot of indoor plumbing, people's houses have old infrastructure, have old pipes, and sometimes they leak. And when they leak, obviously that can lead to a very expensive water bill. And so we actually have an assistance program to help fix people's infrastructure so that they are not having to pay a high water bill just because they had a leaky toilet, for example. We can also adjust payment plans so people can pay us over time with no interest. So if they cannot pay us this month, we say, that's fine, we'll add it to your next month's bill. And then we spread it over time. So the idea is we try to be flexible in how people pay us, particularly for lower income Portlanders. And lastly, we can provide up to $500 for people who are renters. So not for people that own their properties, but for people that rent their properties. If there's a fear that they might lose their house, or if they've lost their job and they cannot pay their rent, we can provide them with $500 assistance. And so this has actually been huge in the last year, because with the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic impacts it had here, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people couldn't pay their rent. So a lot of people were making a lot of requests from our funding to get this, all of these services that we offer. So people were asking for different payment plans and payment arrangements for the rental assistance, for crisis assistance. And we had to enroll a lot more people into our tier 1 and tier 2 financial assistance plans. So that's just one example. So that's brings us to the end of our presentation. And
then we have wrapped up the session. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Muftugil and Mr. Pacheco, for your kind collaboration and valuable contributions. It's been a pleasure to host you today at our webinar. I would also like to thank my colleague, Professor Güney Celbeş, for his collaboration and help. I would like to hand the microphone over to our chair, Professor Özçam, before we finish.
I'm Professor Dr. Ahmet Özçam. So on behalf of our Department of Economics, I would like to thank Mr. Muftugil, engineer at the Assets Management Department, and Mr. Pacheco, the manager at the Equity, I guess, the department for their very valuable contributions today and for accepting our offer and being with us. Presentation was very interesting. Actually, certain places very fascinating because so we've seen how the governmental agency, water office in the United States, so how they plan their financial concerns, but also some equity concerns. And then I've seen that perhaps our students ask more questions on the equity issues. That was interesting. And we learned a lot of things, actually, not only we felt a little bit like how it would be in living in Portland and Oregon, and how the water problem was solved there. So we've had a lot of insights on many things, starting from the water business, like capital intensive infrastructure, asset management. We understand, so the planning and the need, the money needed at over the horizon at different the times, at certain peaks and lows and things like that. Water supply and sewage, affordability, and finally the equity. So it's been an honor, a great pleasure to host you today at Yeditepe University and Department of Economics Sustainable Development webinar. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you again for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.